I hope that it can give a little sense of that combination of the mystery, the mysticism, the spirituality, the power, the sexiness of driving across America. My first car was?
No.
I never did tell you. Right. So
do you want to look it up? I like to see a visual.
Oh no, I checked, Mr. Kirby. I can still see it in my mind's eye. I'm Brian Palecek. I've had a lot of experiences with the arts and humanities. My first car was a 1958 red and white Ford Fairlane.
Yeah, look in this car up here. Wow, that is a beautiful automobile. Holy cow. So when did you get this?
Well, this was actually my parents' car.
Uh-huh.
Does that count?
Oh, yeah. It almost always is.
Well, I was 14 in 1958, and my parents had bought that car probably in 1958. And that was the car that I took my driver's test with in Belleville, Kansas, which is in Republic County, Kansas, which is at the north central line of counties, right next to or connected to Nebraska. So that was my world of the farming community in Kansas, and our family was a Ford family.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It was Chevy people were the other. Right.
Yeah.
Just like as farmers, we were Minneapolis Moline people, and the others were the John Deere, which was seen as very low. We were Yankees fans, and other people were Dodgers fans.
Yep.
So it all comes back to the Ford Fairlane.
Say, looks like young Chuck Green's got himself a new Ford. And one of those big, beautiful Ford Fairlane 500s, too. He must have moved up in the world fast. Hey, Chuck, how come the new Ford? Because I'm a smart trader, that's how come. You know, right now is when Ford dealers need room for next year's models. So they're making real good deals on this year's models. And I took advantage of the situation to get just the kind of a car I've always wanted. But a Ford Fairlane 500, Chuck. All that luxury. Well, I happen to like luxury, don't you? Look. I got the works. Power steering, power brakes, power windows, automatic transmission, everything. Notice the good-looking fabric I picked, too. And white walls, two-tone paint job. I didn't hold back a bit. A man doesn't have to hold back the way they're making trades on these Ford Fairlane 500s today. Maybe you ought to think about getting one.
So here I am, a 14-year-old person, freshman in high school, 1958, and as I recall, I didn't have any rules that I had to follow. You know, it was just assumed that I was go to school and do my work and do my work on the farm, but there were no rules about when I could go places or how long I could be out. And I don't remember any conflicts. I have two brothers, one older and one younger, fighting over the car. But if I want to go with my friends to a movie, which was the number one reason we'd go any place, it was, I could just do it on my own. And so as I was thinking about my first car and the role it played, I didn't drive it to school. School is only 3 miles away in a very tiny town, about 190 people, called Munden, and it's probably down to 40 people now. And as the community got smaller and smaller and smaller, and the farms got bigger and bigger. But what I would use this car for was going to movies. And there were theaters in 3 of the nearby towns. One in my town of Belleville, which was, we were on a farm, so we didn't live in Belleville, the Blair Theater. And then in Concordia, Kansas, which was about 30 miles away, there's the Bonham Grand Theater. And then in Hebron, Nebraska, and right across the border, there was the Thayer, and there were 2 drive-ins.
Nice.
So going to the movies was a big deal for me, but also those drive-ins were fun. But I was interested in being with my friends, and I had dates, like a common thing, but it was the movie that I was really interested in, and I'm still a movie person. I'm part of a Bismarck group called Cinema 100, the Bismarck Mandan Film Society.
Uh-huh.
And we've been in existence as an independent film group since 1973, so this is our 52nd year. And we have a film series in October and then another film series in January through March. But it's so fascinating to trace the history of movie going, and where do movies come from, and how do we watch them. And so I'm part of that world that went to the drive-in theater or drove to various little towns, all of which had a theater. And that's why I'm driving my first car. I need to get to the movie with my friends, or nobody was going to believe this, but there were times that I would go to the drive-in myself because I wanted to see a certain movie.
Uh-huh.
And I remember seeing a movie called Fanny, which was, I don't know how many people would recognize it, but it's a movie with Maurice Chevalier and Charles Boyer, French guys, but it was in English. Very poignant, sad, one of the most poignantly sad movies of all time. But I wanted to see this movie, and I drove myself. Movies are a really important part of my life. I mean, I'm a literature person. My college degrees were in English, and I've taught English, but also something now we call humanities, which I'm a big advocate for. But I remember as a child, in the 1950s, in these small towns in Kansas, there were some small towns that were like 200 people. In order to get people to come to town in the summer, they would have a free movie that would be shown in the city park on some kind of a screen that was actually constructed. And I think in one case they had a great big sheet of some kind. But it's so fascinating because you might go to Sibley Park in Bismarck, and somebody is sponsoring the showing of a movie and of course they would have to get licensing to be able to show it publicly and to show it free and advertise. But so there I'd be, with my community, all the people of the neighbors, some relatives, and we're sitting there watching these movies. And I'm sure I was experiencing that when I was 4 or 5. And I saw a lot of what you might call the franchises today. I saw Francis the Talking Mule. I don't know if anybody's heard of that. And the Bowery Boys was another one. What was the other one? I was trying to remember. Ma and Pa Kettle. Do those ring any bells?
No.
No? Wow, no. My gosh. Well, they were extremely popular, late 40s, early 50s.
Uh-huh.
But they were seen as sort of the lightweight film, but they were quite popular. But I saw All the King's Men, which won Best Picture in 1949, and the Benny Goodman story, the Glenn Miller story, some other movies that were actually... I saw... It Came from Outer Space.
Oh, nice.
In one of the local community. And so we saw a real variety of movies. I still cherish that experience of watching with the community, my community. And a very common phrase that I still use sometimes at the end of the movie, when the final thing happens and the music is billowing, it says "the end," and somebody would say, "Well, I guess that's it." And that phrase to end it up, like we've gone through this process with these people going through all sorts of difficulties, whether they were making fools of themselves like in Ma and Pa Kettle and comedies, or whether it was a serious movie like All the King's Men, and I guess that's it, meaning it's done, but the story is now completed, resolved, so...
I miss drive-in theaters. We used to have one in Williston, and that shut down maybe 10 years ago. I don't think it was that long ago, but it lasted for a while. I don't even know if any exist anymore. I think there's a few around the country, but there's got to be literally only a few.
Right.
I don't know why that's not a thing anymore.
I think I took our three children, Jeremiah, Justin, and Sarah, to see Clash of the Titans at Mandan, at the Mandan Drive-In Theater. There was a Tarzan movie we went to too. I think one of my children said he thought he saw Empire Strikes Back as a drive-in movie, but I also remember when it comes to just cars in our lives, in my life, and that those early cars that belonged to my parents, my father and mother were totally supportive of movies. And in fact, they were really resistant to getting a television. And I can't remember, they would say something like, well, it might distract you from getting your homework done, but I don't remember having any homework, really. I don't know what we did in school, actually, but we would go to the drive-in theater, and I remember seeing Elmer Gantry, which is 1960, with Burt Lancaster. That's a great movie about this evangelical preacher who is corrupt and hypocritical and all this, but very powerful movie. And I've seen, we saw a lot of drive-in theater movies. So there we were in our car, and it was very much a part of that late 50s, early 60s life.
Totally.
Yeah. I've lived with a lot of cars that we owned, and that, for example, the first car that I ever owned actually belonged to my future wife, that's Bonnie, and she had a 1967 Cougar. It was fawn green, she thought she remembered. And it's a very pretty car, very sporty, nice car. And then when we got married in 1969, that was actually the first car I ever owned, actually. And because I really didn't live that much with cars, and that was, when I went to college, I didn't have a car in our small town, and I moved to North Dakota in 1967 to work as an English teacher in Dodge, North Dakota, which is in the western part of the state. And I didn't have a car then, but I lived with some people, and then a person drove me to Bismarck every weekend where I'd meet my future spouse, Bonnie, and then he'd drive me back. But then when we got married in 1969, suddenly there was a car that I owned. But I do have a story about one of the really important parts of my car life is, I'll try to make this as succinct and clear as possible. Again, my family lived on a farm, and the farm is still there in this beautiful home that my parents made and remodeled, and we had these various kinds of cars. And this is probably with the Ford Galaxy, probably. I would be the driver for my friends when we would go mainly to movies, actually. Or maybe we were going to a town where there was a basketball game or something. And one of the problems was, in my life, is that we lived on a dirt road. It did not have gravel. And my father had some kind of a conflict with the county commissioners, and they refused to gravel it. They were saying he should pay for his own gravel. But he refused to, so whenever it rained, the road was pure mud. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we got used to driving on the mud, and sliding sometimes into the ditch and having to be pulled out with somebody comes along with a tractor and then pull us out. But, I was used to taking the risk and sometimes succeeding and sometimes not. So swerving around on a muddy road, but the pavement was about 3/4 of a mile away from where we lived. So it was almost a mile that you'd have to go to get to the place where there would be pavement. And there's an important part of my life to articulate this. I remember once my friends and I went to Hebron, Nebraska, to the drive-in theater. Hebron is about 2,000 people. And we watched Brides of Dracula. Mm. And it was very terrifying. It was actually, I think, a good movie. And a little bit after midnight, we were the only car left in the lot, and they shut the movie down. I mean, that was just totally unheard of. They said, we're not going to continue or something like that. And it had rained. And so I drove my friends to their homes. And then I got to what we called the corner where the pavement ended, and I knew I couldn't make it to drive home. I leave the car on the pavement. I'm walking home in the dark with a slight rain going on, and I've just seen the Dracula picture. And, and I didn't get to see the end even, that Dracula might be somewhat subdued. So there I'm walking. It was really actually one of the most, I mean, I've been terrified by other things, I suppose, but that is an important symbolic thing for me, that I'm walking home in the dark with thinking about this, Dracula in the dark. But here's another part of my life story.
That must have been a long walk.
Well, yes, it was. Of course, it eventually came to an end, and we were all used to the walk. It wasn't like, but at the same time. So here's another part of my story. I'm a big opera fan, opera person, and I've been an opera person ever since I was a child, actually, 10-year-old, 12 years old, and my access to opera was every Saturday in the fall and then throughout the spring. The Metropolitan Opera would broadcast, and does still, Metropolitan in New York City, broadcast live matinee performances of the opera. And so that was my way of experiencing the best singers of the time and the best opera house probably in the opera company in the world. And I took that very, very seriously and loved it. And there were years in that period of, let's say, 56, 58, 62, when I'm still home and not in college, that the radio transmission, the broadcast wouldn't come through. Maybe a local station wouldn't carry it. And so in order to get it, I'd have to listen on the radio, on the car radio. So it might be that if the car was on the corner because it had rained, I would walk to the corner and I would sit in that car, probably either the Fairlane or the Galaxy, and listen to these opera performances. And I don't know if any of these names resonate with you, La Boheme and Carmen and De Rosenkavalier. Do any of those names sound familiar to you?
They don't.
Okay, well, they're the greatest operas in the world.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah. And so that would show you that I am alone following my pursuits, my interests, my passions. And but now that you mentioned, there's another side to this musically. In the middle 50s, let's say 55, 56, 78, I'm really following the popular music top 40. And I would listen in the car radio. We had a radio in the house, and eventually there's probably a transistor or other kinds of small radios. But there I'd be in the car, having done my work maybe, and I'm listening to see what the top 40 is for. Here let's say it's 1958. I'm 14 years old, and I'm watching as a song appears on the top 40, and then the next week it might have gone up a little bit. Now it's at 5. Now it's at 2. And next week it dropped down, but I'm listening and following this on the car radio. So that car has played a role as transportation, obviously, and showing off and having fun with your friends and all this. But at the same time, it was a source of music because there's a car radio.
Yeah, Jared mentioned you were really into opera.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Okay. Does that still continue to this day?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Listening, or are you actually going to operas?
Well, there are many ways to experience opera, actually, and it's important that as a child, my primary experience was listening to but I knew what the story was because the host would tell us, in the first act, Carmen has just manipulated this young soldier to freer from the police, and then the next act, the host is keeping us. But I wasn't that clear about what's going on, just because I'm listening. But I'm taking it in. I hear that sound. I'm a good pianist. I'm already playing the piano. I have access to playing some of these pieces on the piano as a 10-year-old, 12-year-old, 14-year-old, 18-year-old. And then eventually I remember the first time I ever saw an opera. It was on television, but it was a live performance of on the NBC Opera Theater, like 1960 maybe. And we didn't have a television at our house because our parents still kind of resisted. My father said, "I want to go to the movies. I don't want to just sit at home," which I loved, his attitude.
Yeah.
And because we weren't begging for a television, I remember, but this one uncle said, "Well, there's going to be this opera. Maybe Brian would like to see it." And I thought, wow, see, I lived in a very supportive community.
Nice.
There are a lot of people who don't experience that, especially if you have sort of weird and unusual interests.
Yeah.
Like classical music or literature and all those kinds of things. I just followed those things, and I had friends, and they knew what I was up to. And I saw my first opera, which is, are you ready? The Italian is L'amore de tre re, the love of the three kings. And the music is by Italo Montemezzi. And it was filled with violence and skullduggery and adultery and all sorts of things. Pretty impressive. But eventually I saw live performances, and to an extent that I've traveled, New York City and Prague, where my son Jeremiah lives, I've seen maybe 2 live performances there. And right now, the Grand Theater in Bismarck, in the fall, hosts maybe 10. It's a live performance, but you're seeing it on screen.
Right.
And so starting in like maybe November this fall, there will be maybe 10 of those. They're live performances, and there's a group of people in the Bisman area that go to that and pay a little more than our normal ticket price. And so, yeah, opera's a big deal.
Is that pretty exclusive to Italy?
Oh, no. It's a very European thing, but well, then America too. No, I think opera's on German, French, Russian, Czech, American operas, Porgy and Bess of George Gershwin, probably. Do you know Porgy and Bess? I loves you, Porgy. Don't let him handle me. Don't let him take me and drive me wild.
I did not, but now I'm in love with it. That was good.
Well, okay. I've got plenty of nothing, and nothing's plenty for me. Or the one that's most famous, summertime, and the living is easy. Mm-hmm. Fish are jumping, and the cotton is high or wild or something. Yeah, that's Porgy and Bess, George Gershwin, 1930s. It's a full opera. It's seen as an opera rather than what we would call a musical, because the dialogue is sung as well. So It isn't just a song and then they talk.
Right.
That would be what we call a musical. But this is a through composed opera where they're talking and singing at the same time. And actually, it's now that you've got me going on this, here's my theory of opera. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Well, here's a question. If you're watching a movie and there's music, whatever music, let's say we're going to watch Jaws. I remember I taught an intro to music class at the University of Mary a few years back, for about 10 years, actually.
Love Jaws.
But yes, and this is the 50th anniversary, and it's a magnificent movie.
Yeah,
really.
75.
Yeah, 1975, 50th anniversary.
Yeah.
With a great score by John Williams, the 2 notes, it's a half step, dun-dum, 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 dun-dum. It's just a half step, da-da, da-da, da-da. But, so there's music, John Williams music in Jaws, and there's a question, what is the role of music in film. And I think you could say it's there it creates an ambiance, because it's not just in the background, because it's all around you. You know, you're in the music, actually. So it's not just up there on the screen. But there's a sense in which it is supporting the action that's going on.
Right.
So if we want to warn the audience or just frighten them, to prepare them that this shark is close by, we might hear dun-dum, 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 dun-dum. So is opera different? Because I would say the music isn't there to support the action particularly. This is my theory. Are you ready? It would be, in opera, life is transformed into music. Now you think about that for a few years, if you want. You know, it's interesting to me. It isn't just because there's music going on from the beginning to the end, and we care about who composed the music. That's why I said George Gershwin wrote the music. The composer dominates the opera.
Uh-huh.
That's why we say it's Wagner's Tristan and Isolde. It is Puccini's La Bohème. It's Bizet's Carmen. It's Mozart's Don Giovanni. Because the composer kind of rules. But how does the composer rule? Well, you can see it in this case when the human beings open their mouths to say something. Maybe they're complaining about how their true love just left them, or they're dialoguing with somebody and saying, "Why did you do this?" and "I will kill you." When they open their mouths to speak, music comes out of their mouths. That is really strange, but if you think about it, it's kind of awesome, actually. Now that you've got me all wound up here.
Oh, right.
You know, my college degrees were in English, and I got my master's degree from University of Kansas in 1967, and the bachelor's degree from a small town Lutheran college in 1966. The college is Bethany College, and I still think a lot about what I learned in those places. And then I've had my own long career as a teacher, mostly of English and what we now call humanities, that whole world of arts, philosophy, history, comparative religion, archaeology is part of that. So I've lived with poetry a lot, and I was thinking, what's a poem about cars that might be kind of interesting to share with our people?
Yes, please.
So I'm going to change my glasses here now that my eyes are going downhill. And I don't know if people know Allen Ginsberg. You probably heard that name.
For sure.
And beat poet of the 1950s, 60s, and he died in the 1990s, but he's associated with Jack Kerouac and Gary Snyder, Peter Orlovsky. Lawrence Ferlinghetti was part of his world. But in the early 50s, he wrote a poem called The Green Automobile. And just that title, imagining a green automobile. That's my own first car was red and white. And I'm just going to read a portion of the Green Automobile by Allen Ginsberg. And I'll kind of change my voice to sound maybe a little bit like how this kind of person might sound, might sound, rather than like myself. The Green Automobile by Allen Ginsberg, written in 1953, and you can easily check what a nice 1953 car looks like. If I had a green automobile, I'd go find my old companion in his house on the Western Ocean. Ha, 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 ha. I'd honk my horn at his manly gate. Inside, his wife and 3 children sprawl naked on the living room floor. He'd come running out to my car full of heroic beer and jump screaming at the wheel, for he is the greater driver. We'd pilgrimage to the highest mount of our earlier Rocky Mountain visions, laughing in each other's arms, delight surpassing the highest Rockies, and after old agony, drunk with New Year's, bounding toward the snowy horizon, blasting the dashboard with original bop hot rod on the mountain, we'd batter up the cloudy highway where angels of anxiety careen through the trees and scream out of the engine. We'd burn all night on the Jack Pine Peak. Seen from Denver in the summer dark forest like unnatural radiance illuminating the mountaintop, childhood, youth, time, age, and eternity would open like sweet trees in the nights of another spring and dumbfound us with love. For we can see together the beauty of souls hidden like diamonds in the clock of the world, like Chinese magicians can confound the immortals with our intellectuality hidden in the mist. In the green automobile which I have invented, imagined and visioned on the roads of the world, more real than the engine on a track in the desert, purer than Greyhound and swifter than physical jet plane, Denver, Denver will return roaring across the city and county building lawn, which catches the pure emerald flame streaming in the wake of our auto. In this poem, which lasts maybe 3 pages, it's imagining there's a special kind of American, I think, mystical experience, which is called driving across country in America.
Yeah.
And it's a combination, it's geographical, and it's very often driving on back roads rather than on the major highways. And so you've got this vehicle and you're driving with your friend and or friends across the country. There's the Rocky Mountains and Grand Canyon, and then you're driving up the coast of California, and then you're zipping down to Texas and over to West Virginia, down to Florida. It's a geographical thing of exploring this amazing thing called America. But at the same time, it has a kind of hallucinatory, mystical quality about it. So in the poem, this combination of there's the Rocky Mountains, yes. There are these various there's towns like Denver or Topeka, and you've heard of these names, and but at the same time, you're experiencing something wild and wonderful. And it's made possible because of cars. You're driving, whirling along. So it's a trip.
Yes.
And for a person like Mr. Ginsberg, trip would imply also hallucinatory drugs or things that you use to create this kind of consciousness. But you can also jump in your car and drive to Seattle if you want to right now from Bismarck, or drive over to wherever you want to go. Drive, drive, drive. Once you got me sucked into this, thinking about this, one of the reasons I emphasized driving to these theaters in Republic County and Thayer County, Republic County, Kansas, and Thayer County, Nebraska, and around. When I came to North Dakota, I became kind of focusing on a very specific area. So even though I can imagine, here I've given this little spiel about the mystic experience of jumping in a car on your vehicle and driving across America, it's not something I do or did.
Oh, yeah.
Even though I've driven to Kansas every once in a while
right.
to visit my relative, but even that's kind of a special thing. It's a big distance. And I don't know how many Europeans, like my son lives in Prague in Czech Republic right now, I don't know how common it is for Europeans to jump in the car and say, let's drive across Europe, as opposed to let's drive down to Kansas, let's drive over to Tennessee. And So in a way, I'm a kind of a country roads person. So the idea of staying off the main highway is appealing to me.
Yes, totally.
And I'm not the kind of person that I didn't jump in the car and say, let's go, let's drive and be wild and drink and just be wild people and drive to Florida. So I have to process what that, who am I? I'm kind of a country road person. And so this last August, our son Justin and Jeremiah and their two daughters drove from Minneapolis and with me down to Kansas to visit my relatives for a few days. And my son Justin, who's already been sucked into your podcast, he's thinking about cars in our lives because he can't resist it. He rented a GMC Denali, which is a fancy vehicle, evidently costs like $110,000. And we drove down to Kansas in that, and that was very nice.
Yeah, I
and
bet.
there was this big screen, and the GPS was helping us along all the way. Every time we stayed one night in Omaha, and there's the GPS. Just nobody's rustling with a map.
Yeah, taking up the whole windshield.
Right,
and,
which
yeah.
is a change in culture, I know, and all this, and I probably wouldn't be able to see it, but there was this GPS saying, turn right at next stoplight, and we just followed it. So driving turns it out to be a new thing because there's somebody, it's not a human being, watching you all the time and knows exactly where you are and can say, turn left at this next thing. And then you do.
Yep.
So we drove down and talked with the ChatGPT person, a creature. And,
Creature.
But that was part of with a very nice, highly expensive, I guess it's an SUV technically, but pretty nice car.
I went on my first road trip
Yes.
probably when I was 25. And it was me and two other friends, and we went to pick up one of their brothers who just got out of training in San Diego. And we drove overnight from Bismarck and then stopped in Vegas, slept there for the night, and then drove on to San Diego. 20 hours straight. I slept first and then woke up, I think, somewhere in Montana, and then it was my turn to drive. Your poem kind of reminded me of this because it was my first time as a kid from North Dakota. We did a lot of, small road trips from Williston to Bismarck, back and forth to Fargo, Minot. That drive is so boring, back and forth, except for that one section by the Badlands. But getting out, it was the first time I saw mountains. First time I saw desert when we got to California, palm trees, and then to San Diego, first time I saw the ocean. So that whole trip within, 30 hours was just mind-blowing.
Yes.
Also, I didn't realize that I had, what's the term? Megalophobia. So when I saw mountains kind of in the distance and we're getting close, I used to have these dreams too as a kid where large spaceships would just show up and I would have to look away. It would terrify me. When I got into the cities and I got close to really large buildings, I would get this kind of anxiety.
Yes.
And I had to look it up. I'm like, why am I afraid of really large objects? And then I looked it up and it was called megalophobia. Not that uncommon, so I didn't feel like a total weirdo. It's definitely gotten better now. I go to the cities a lot more often, so I can stand next to a building and look straight up at it. I still get it a little bit when I'm going to certain camping trips, heading toward the mountains, and I see that in the distance coming closer, and I get a strange anxiety come over me. But that was such a fun, insane experience that I had.
Wow.
Yeah.
And as you even listed those different geographical things you saw, you said, first time I saw a mountain. So imagine okay, this mountain is a real geographical thing, but it played some kind of a symbolic role. It's affecting your heart, mind, spirit, soul.
Yeah.
Then you said, then I saw a desert.
Yeah.
Then I saw the ocean.
Yeah.
And I thought there was a fourth thing on there, some palm trees.
Palm trees,
so
right.
on this trip in a car with your friends, and you could see there's a kind of dreamlike quality of my first mountain.
Right.
And then I see, I'm terrified of mountains.
Yeah.
It's big. It's big. The ocean is big. The ocean is big as well.
Yeah.
So there's a poem in that. But right at the beginning when you said, I woke up somewhere in Montana.
Yeah.
Now that could be a song. I woke up somewhere in Montana and I thought of you. You know, I mean, it's just so powerful that, or just I woke up somewhere in Montana.
Yeah.
There's a lot of poetry in that, but this combination of the Allen Ginsberg, the real experience in a real car, even though the green car makes it seem even kind of strange and mysterious, and it's also a hallucination of magic and power, and to think that you even had a neurotic tendency toward megalophobia, the ocean, how big. Well, speaking of ocean, I have another ocean story. Are you ready? If you don't mind.
I'm ready.
Well, when Justin was about 15 and Jeremiah must have been 11 or 12, I took them to California, and we flew to Anaheim, that area, and then we rented a car, and we were in L.A. and we went to Disneyland, and then we were going to drive up. What's the famous highway going up from Los Angeles to San Francisco? It has a name.
PCH.
Is that what it is?
The Pacific.
It's a very nice road, and it's not that heavily traveled, so it's not like it's 6 lanes of all this. So we're driving, or just leaving Los Angeles to start the process and going up. And as we're driving along, there's a sign that said, Malibu Beach, that way. And we drove off, and then there was this beach with maybe 2 people on it, sand, the ocean coming in, and Jeremiah and Justin jump out of there. You know, they could have spent the whole day there, and the trip could have ended, I think.
Oh, yeah, right.
At that point.
And that would have been just...
They were at a beach at Malibu, and it wasn't like it was overly crowded. We didn't pay anything to even get in there. Mm-hmm. It was just, but there we were, driving up the coast of California. Did you know the Green Earth One World?
Yeah.
You were part of that world.
I was.
Oh, my goodness.
I moved to Bismarck from Williston in 96. So some of my first concerts were there. It's pretty much the reason I got into music, seeing these bands play and perform,
yes.
and then me being like, wait, I could do this? That's so cool. Yeah, you got to tell me how you got into this, how you were booking bands. It seems like there was almost a direct railroad route for Olympia and Seattle acts to come through.
Yes.
How did this come about?
I love this question because the One World Coffee House existed on Broadway in Bismarck. I think isn't it Broadway?
Yes.
And in a regular place that would be a business. And it was started around 1985, I would say. And the story, this would be my version of the story, was I was part of the movement dealing with nuclear weapons in the early 1980s. And in 82, there was a movement called the Nuclear Weapons Freeze Campaign all over the country, trying to get the United States and the Soviet Union to negotiate a treaty to stop any further production of nuclear weapons. That would be called a freeze, rather than, it wasn't calling for abolition or even a reduction, but to stop the further development of any new nuclear weapons, the Soviet Union, United States. And I was part of that campaign. In 1982, there was a referendum on the ballot in North Dakota and many other states about whether to send a message to President Reagan calling for this kind of a negotiation of that kind of a treaty. And I was the spokesperson for that movement. And the voters in North Dakota passed that referendum by 58% to 42%. So we sent our message to President Reagan to negotiate a treaty like that we would support it. And in 1983, then we developed a statewide organization called the North Dakota Peace Coalition and had a board of directors, and I was the executive director of that. And one of our most active people was a man named Dr. Stanley Dienst. And he was a member of Union of Concerned Scientists and the Physicians for Social Responsibility, which was an international organization working for warning people about the threat of nuclear weapons and nuclear war, and then for the abolition. Well, we had these various successes, and there was a climate in the state of support for what we were doing. And he said, I think we should have a coffee house of some kind. And the Peace Coalition should create it. And he said, there's a spot on Broadway, was it, you said? Mm-hmm. And that I think we could rent, and then we would have a coffee house, and it would be about dealing with peace and social justice in the world and ending nuclear weapons and all this. And I remember his coming to the Peace Coalition, said the coalition should organize it and all that. And we were saying, there's no way we could raise the rent money, and we would not be very good at that. And it's a great idea, and he says, well, I'll do it myself. And he was a kidney transplant person, and so he had some money. And he rented that place. He did create a board that we would, but he was the ultimate leader, and fixed up. It was a very nice place, and he and his wife Pat wanted to be that it was not scroungy looking or squalid, but nice and attractive. And there were tables and then he wanted to have programs every Friday and Saturday night. And he asked me to be the program person, come up with them. And I said, okay, I would. I was used to doing that kind of thing, but I did want a little pay for it because I knew that I would get burnt out from it if I didn't have some sense that there was something, some kind of money coming in from it. So that was the deal, that every Friday and Saturday night there would be a show at the coffee house, One World Coffee House. And I think it could hold maybe there's laws about how many you can hold. There were
right, yeah.
maybe 40 people, I don't know, something like that. But it wasn't a tiny place. So I would come up with these programs, and I wanted it to be a real variety of things. So it wasn't just seen as that this is a music place. It wasn't. There were poetry nights, there were like movie nights, there were discussions on serious subjects. I remember that in October used to be Gay and Lesbian History Month, and I organized a 4-night class, actually, with speakers that came in, and the people came to listen to this kind of a lecture and a discussion, and that happened over a 4-week period. There was one, I got money from the North Dakota Humanities Council that for a Bismarck History Month, where we had various historians talking about. So there was a variety of things, poetry night and book discussion. Sometimes things would happen on the weekends, on Sunday afternoon too. But one thing that was especially powerful were these different kinds of music. Well, there were country groups and maybe the term. Green music. What is it? Mountain music or whatever it is called. You know what I'm
bluegrass.
Bluegrass. Yes. Yeah, bluegrass music. And I would try to have classical because I was part of that classical world. I was a program host on public radio for a while on Friday nights, a classical host. So I wanted all these things to be there, but there were these young people, and they were high school age people. How old are you when you came?
16 probably.
Yeah, you were a young,
Yeah.
pre-18 person. You
Yes.
were a high school person. And they created bands, punk bands, grunge bands, rock bands, all sorts of bands, and they wanted to have a place to play. And so I wanted to find people to play because I had to find 10 shows or 8 shows every month, a variety. So there were certain bands like the Trash Can Alligators was one of them, and I still have contact with some of the Trash Can Alligators. And there were others. The Pumpkin Seeds was 2 guys who played. What was your band called?
Sugar and Spikes was
Sugar and Spikes. Okay.
one of the first bands.
Yeah.
Disrespectfully Yours was actually the first band.
Oh, okay. And what did you play usually?
Guitar.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was there
electric.
was
Mostly punk.
it punk? And did you write your own songs? Or
Yes.
Make it?
Yeah.
So those were my backup because I knew these people wanted to play. And what I love about this is again my way of looking at it, is they like playing at the coffee house. And they said this to me and to us because the audience came to listen. If they were in a bar, people would be drinking and just talking, and then they'd be the music in the background, sort of.
Yeah.
But the audience actually, the audience didn't have to buy anything, which was really nice that they came and they'd buy soda or something, and there were some other various kinds of foods there. But the audience would listen, their friends would come. If they had written their own songs, they wanted the people to understand what they were saying or listen to the words and the like. And I loved having those people. And of course, there was the political view was that they were part of a place that was encouraging protection of the environment, dealing with weapons, war, human rights, things like that. And I've said this story many times to many people that there were some people that had mosh pits. Was that a part of your experience? This is a wild form of dancing where people are slamming into each other, banging, and in retrospect, that was kind of dangerous because sometimes a table might get broken. We didn't want to destroy our nice place.
Right.
It was actually kind of nice, and so that was a kind of a contradiction. I knew that some of the people who were playing expected if you're going to play grunge punk, it should be part of a sleazy atmosphere rather than one that was nice.
Yeah.
And there's a contradiction there almost, but they didn't seem to complain. I mean, but we would have these, the mosh pits would happen on occasion and different kinds of movements. And very often what I'd be talking with these 16-year-olds or 17-year-olds, or I remember one time there was a group I was calling them, then they were talking with each other on different lines on the phone. And they said, well, what should we call ourselves? Because it was their first gig ever. I love that. And so they're talking, and I'm thinking that maybe Trash Can Alligators came up with their name on the phone that time. But so there were times when I remember at least twice, and this is very important for me, I would call, let's say, looking for this one, trying to contact this one person, see if he would schedule his band. And some man would answer, hello? I said, hello, is this Mr. Rogers or whatever? Yeah. Well, this is Brian Palecek. Is Troy there? No. Well, will you be, I'm with the coffee house, and will you see him sometime? No. I said, well, I'm trying to schedule a performance or a gig. I don't know. I probably used the word performance. And I said, I want to tell you what a pleasure it's been working with Troy. He's just been so great, keep, coming there and performing and being there on time and just being so reliable. And he has, he couldn't believe what he was hearing. I knew that. But eventually I read an article someplace, the difference between being a parent and being a mentor.
Mm-hmm.
This man was Troy's father. And they had gone through 16 years of, parenting, and who knows where it was, arguments, conflicts, good things, bad things. But he was not used to hearing, boy, it's been great working with Troy. He's just been really fun. That was a new thing for him to hear, whether it had an impact on the world. But it was that clarification that I was not Troy's father. I was a mentor he was doing something for me. I wasn't there to help Troy be a nice person or set him straight or steer him toward the goal. If I wanted we wanted would for him to say, I want to be part of a worldwide movement dealing with war, peace, human rights, and dealing with nuclear weapons. That might be. But so I saw him in a fresh way. I was providing something for him that he really valued, a place to play music. And but the father had to, I know he had gone through a year. Who knows how bad it was? Maybe terrible.
Yeah.
Or it could have been just normal conflict, and I'm sick of this kid, and I don't want to see him again, or whatever it is. But that happened, I think, at least twice with the same scenario perfectly. And then I realized that second time by saying that how nice Bill was, I knew I was playing with the guy a little bit, but it was true.
Right.
And then a clarification. I was his mentor in the sense I was an older person. I knew that Troy was nice to me. He was so thankful. He and his band, thanks a lot for letting us play. And I love the fact that they were expressing gratitude. Yes, we're grateful that you let us play here. So now let's hear your stories. What was it called again, your band?
Well, I was in a lot of different bands. Disrespectfully Yours, Sugar and Spikes, which turned into Toxic Shock Syndrome. Before I was in a band, I was going to One World and just watching some of these acts come through. Mm-hmm. And I can't remember all of them. I miss Calvin Johnson. I remember hearing his band play there before. He came through another time, so I got to see him.
Yes.
The Need, the Butchies, a lot of just punk and grunge, Seattle, Olympia.
Yes.
How were you getting in contact with these guys? Or were they getting in contact with you? Somebody would contact me, actually, because they were traveling through Montana, from Seattle, then Montana, then maybe Billings, then maybe Dickinson, possibly. And then, the next place is Bismarck, and the next one is Fargo and Minneapolis. But I think it was always they would contact, but somehow the coffee house was on people's minds. Yeah, it got on the radar somehow. Yes,
and they would contact and...
Yeah, it's pretty quick to... Yeah, once I started doing my own booking, I started searching out other bands. I would email them, say, hey, can you come to Bismarck? And then I'd get some responses. And then that just kind of snowballed where they would share my contact. Then I'm getting bands from other places contacting me. Hey, we're going to be in Bismarck on this date. Can we come play? So what I started doing was booking venues, halls, Midtowner, and AmVets, and then a few at One World. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember what the situation was with you guys. I don't think you ever charged to rent it out. You would just...
No, we never would have done that.
And we would do maybe I remember one time we did $1 per person to get in, and then 2 and 3. And even then, definitely affordable. I think at the most I ever did for some of my shows would be like $5, and that would be at the Midtown.
Wow.
Places like that we could get 300 kids in pretty easy. late 90s, early 2000s. It was definitely Green Earth when at one of my first punk rock experiences, and seeing these guys on stage, and then shortly after I was given a guitar, and then it just clicked, like, oh, I can do this. Without really learning to play guitar, I started a punk band right away, which is probably
and
about
that was
as
part of
punk as
that
you could
world.
be.
That how well do you know? You need to know music. I can create, use chords, and I can use a rhythmic sound.
Yeah.
This isn't a classical world where you must learn to play those Chopin pieces note by note. It's very disciplined, and it's kind of a torture, actually. But you were part of another musical world with the grunge that says we can create a certain aesthetic, you might say.
Yeah, right. And everybody was so open to it, too. That was such a new experience in itself, where these other kids and people were all, I don't know, you would look at them and definitely we were all judged by what we were wearing, the patches and the ripped jeans and whatnot. But
yes,
they were also the most accepting people I've ever met. Mm-hmm. And I'm still friends with all these guys years later. Now that I'm doing this podcast is pretty much because I was in the music world. And it all kind of started with you a little bit. So I'm glad you're on here, too, to share your experience. And I can share mine a little bit, too.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
But we never really chit-chatted back then. You know, I would show up there, and I think I'd see you here and there. Heard your name a lot more often than I'd see you. But, yeah.
I remember I'd start the show with, like, welcome to it's showtime, the One World Coffee House, the Center for Peace, Freedom, Human Rights, and Love of Planet Earth. It's great to have all of you. And then I realized that the tone of voice, even because culture is so fragmented, to what extent was that grunge kid even comfortable with the way I sound? Like, it's showtime. That isn't necessarily even the tone of voice that they were accustomed to, their various people, and that was a way of connecting me. Okay, you think you're so, like you think I think I'm able to communicate with anybody, and I realize I'm a certain type, and not everybody would necessarily want to be around me, but the coffee house really brought together a real variety of people. I want to hear more about your musical life, but another story that deals with the dangers of the place. Eventually, a restaurant or cafe was established there called the Green Earth Cafe, and that was a for-profit business. They had wonderful food, and they were really known in Bismarck as a great place to eat, and the food tastes good, and it was things that were made at home, breads and things like that. And so there was a little bit of a tension there between a nonprofit coffee house world, which was open to the world, and then the Green Earth, which was actually a business and had to kind of guard its reputation and everything. And when we would have our band nights, and when the show was over, I would go home, or sometimes I would even leave before the show was completely over, and I wasn't going to stay to clean up. I had taken the time, I would work to set up the show, to be there for opening thing, but I didn't want to be part of the cleaning up the dishes and things. I mean,
Yeah.
There should be volunteers to do that.
Right.
And there was Brad. The Deans had a son named Brad who really loved being there, and he would help. Sometimes I would stay and we'd wash glasses and things like that. But the Green Earth people complained at a certain point, somebody needs to clean up afterwards. And you should ask the band. They should tell you can't play here unless you clean up. But I resisted that because I didn't want to say, in order for you to be able to play here, you have to clean up, because I didn't want it to be seen as so moralistic. I'm glad you're here. You're sharing your music. You're doing the wonderful thing. You shouldn't have to clean up the place after you've given your show. So I kind of resisted it, but eventually we were accepted the fact that, okay, ask the band to clean up, and they went along with this, but you can see I had this idea that I didn't want the band to be, it's like you better be good or you can't play here again. And I remember this one time, they used the vacuum cleaner and they cleaned the place up, and we were doing it, and we washed the dishes and everything and that were left over. It was cleaner than when we started. And so the next day I called the people at Green Earth and I said, well, we had a great show last night. Oh yeah, that's what I heard. I said, doesn't it look sparkling clean, And he said, well, you missed the blood in the bathroom. And my cleaning skills are so limited. There are people who would just go clean everything up.
Right.
I didn't even occur to me to go into the bathroom to wash it up, but there was blood in the bathroom. So,
what the heck?
So here we have your band and the other people who knows what caused the bleeding, and somebody fell or they were moshing, whatever it was. But what is funny to me about it is, it never occurred to me to check the blood in the bathroom. But that showed that I don't know how much longer we could have gone on with this without some kind of insurance issues. There were a couple times when, I think it was New Year's Eve one time, when the people lived in apartments in that same building complained about the noise. The police came.
Oh, okay.
And we don't want to be a nuisance, and yet to tell a band like yours to cut the volume, it doesn't seem like we want you to be loud. You should be loud. Mm-hmm. You should be unbearably loud, even though you don't want to hurt your eardrums, and that could be bad. But so I think as time passed and the Green Earth was becoming more of the solid thing, that insurance issues. There were times at Brad when somebody complained about the noise. Well, there were a couple of times people I knew they were politically against the place and they were complaining about something. But Brad and I went down into the basement and just sat down there wondering because the police had said, if we get one more complaint, we're coming on there. And, we want the bands to be able to play, but we didn't feel good about annoying the neighbors either. And I wouldn't want to keep doing that forever. But I remember one band, there was this young man who, I guess he's still in Bismarck, and my daughter, Sarah, sees him every once in a while. He's probably in his 50s now, and I would just love to go talk with him and see. He was known as a person with a lot of issues and troubles. And he had a band, and after the show one night, we were sitting, there was this young man and a couple of his band people. Here he is, 17-year-old kid, obviously a person with certain social, marginalized, where do I fit in society? And we're sitting outside with the man, Dr. Dienst, and this young man is so appreciative, and he said, I want to collect some money for Dr. Dienst and what he's doing here. And so he took his cap off, and somebody put 50 cents or a quarter or a dollar, and maybe he had $5.25, and he gave it to Stan and gave a little speech. And I love the fact that he was becoming he was trying to express his formality. And I want to thank Dr. Dienst for what he's done, and that he's the only person with the balls in Bismarck to be able to do something like this.
Yeah.
He was expressing his gratitude, and he's collected $5. But that was one of those magic moments that if there's anything I'd want from those people is, I don't want you to become some social derelict loser, dead somewhere, or addicted to various drugs. Be great if you would like to be part of the movement to have fewer wars in the world and dealing with nuclear weapons, which is the biggest issue you can possibly deal with because it's so dangerous. But the fact that he was willing to say, thank you, that was nice.
Yeah.
And then he gathered his $5.25 in his cap, and he gives it to this pretty wealthy guy.
Yeah, right.
And gives a speech, So, but there was blood in the bathroom. Well, how wild were your shows?
You would.
On a scale of 5, were they?
Yeah, a 5.5.
Oh, they were
yeah.
okay.
Some were.
Okay,
We've had
yeah.
the cops come a few times to different places. Yeah, there would be blood in the bathrooms at times, or people moshing. Cops would come. Underage drinking, fights, drug use. But I would say for the most part, we policed ourselves. Every once in a while there would be a little riffraff here and there that would come in, but majority of kids would kick them out on their own. And yeah, some shows would fit at One World, like you could only fit 40 people in there,
Yes.
but sometimes we'd cram like 60 in there, and then there'd be people spilling outside, just kind of looking through the window.
Yes.
You could still hear outside, especially when somebody's going in and out. And then for a bit there was, what was it called? Screaming Bean, I think, down on 4th.
Yes.
And there'd be a show at One World and then one at Screaming Bean, and then we just kind of walk back and forth. That was a lot of fun. And then for the bigger shows, we would book at AmVets, Midtowner and Mandan, Legion, other places like that. So yeah, absolutely loved it. Did it for years. Started booking bands from across the country, some even across the world too, when they would come here and go on tour. Yeah, that was another thing I noticed too, for some of these bands who would be from Europe or wherever, they wouldn't realize how big the U.S. was when they would come for touring, and how long it took to get across.
Right.
And
which would be probably in a vehicle of some kind.
Right,
Maybe
yeah,
a car or something.
Yeah.
Crossing America, we've just, yes. That brings us back to our car theme.
Yeah, totally. And then, just meeting people from all over the world was really just because we're playing music in our little city, you know? There's got to be some times where you're sitting there listening. I know you're a very open person, but I'm sure there are times where you're like, oh, this is garbage. I can't listen to this. Even my own band, when I go back and listen to some of the early stuff, I'm like, ugh, how could anybody enjoy this? But everybody did at the time,
Yes, I think one of the challenges, the fact that grunge sound, wouldn't you say punk is harsher than grunge?
Yeah.
What's the name of the Kurt Cobain? He died in like 1996, you think? What is it?
I feel like I was in junior high, 94 maybe.
Okay, because that was important, because we had a memorial event for him when he died, and that was the coffee house playing its role to that 90s quality, Kurt Cobain and all that he represented, a certain style, which is not a harsh, ugly sound. The punk would be a harder. What would be some other terms for something even more harsh than punk, for example?
Well, I suppose like thrash metal.
Thrash, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, would be, yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah, we had a lot of those acts too.
Because we
Just
had
screaming into a microphone,
yes.
turning up the volume on your amps.
Right.
If you tell them to turn down a little bit, they're going to turn it up.
Yeah. Right. Well, and you want them to play, I want it to be the way it should be, even though that's a pretty small venue.
Yeah.
I think one thing, because we were a highly moral view of the world. War is bad, peace is good. Let's work for that. Can we abolish nuclear weapons eventually? Things like that. So we were the epitome of the modern diversity, equity, inclusion kind of person, as a values. So that when a band might have some fascistic leanings, and they did, something that was kind of pro-Hitler or not, I would kind of resist that, but I knew the show would come to an end, So was I supposed to walk up and say, pull the plug and say, you can't sing that song?
I would. But no, I get what you're saying.
See,
yeah.
And it didn't happen that often.
Yeah.
And people probably couldn't understand the words that clearly anyhow. So I'm kind of letting it go rather than saying, well, you can't sing that song here. I didn't.
Yeah.
And the place did. It's done now. We would never do it again with the same without insurance, without security people, and all sorts of things. But that would be part of the struggle of the issue of how to run a place like that. I would love to see somebody who's working on their master's thesis writing maybe they were actually in peace studies, which probably doesn't exist anymore, or it could be a variety of things, writing a history of the coffee house. And I'm so aware that I have my own point of view, and I had a pretty important role, but it is Brian's point of view about the story, and to interview people like yourself and what you saw, when you were there, what you valued. That would be an interesting study, actually, about a place like that, and it's the role of art, the role of the political a certain kind of political consciousness, and so, and yet including these sort of harsh musical forms like the thrash and the punk, which is different, I think, than the grunge, but. Can you remember one of your favorite songs that you sang there?
That I sang there?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was when I first got into punk, it was just wild, chaotic, and sometimes writing songs to push buttons a little bit. And I had there's these other religious kids that I went to school with who were pretty upset that I wasn't religious and kept telling me that I'm going to go to hell and whatnot. Mm. And I wound up writing a song called Shove That Bible Up Your Ass. Mm. And I think that was one when I was in I think it was just a 2-piece band, me and Brooke. I did vocals for a little bit. I can't sing. But, you don't really have to sing if you're in a punk band. And, yeah.
What is singing? What is it?
Right. But, yeah, that was one that was the chorus. It was just shove that Bible up your ass.
Do you remember, was that all the tech of the lyrics, or was there more to it?
There was more to it, but, again, this was something I wrote when I was pretty young and sang then. But, yeah, that was, I remember playing there a few times with various bands. A band then would almost last about 6 months, one of your first bands. And then you'd be in a new band after that with 2 friends from that band and then 2 guys from the other band. And then you start a new group, a power group, if you will. Angsty at the time, Yes. And that venue just kind of gave us an outlet to express our feelings.
Well, you knew that you were... you could do it, and that you probably wouldn't be censored. I wouldn't have pulled the plug on you, but that's an attitude,
Oh yeah, a lot of us had attitudes for sure.
Yes,
which is why we were out at that place. We couldn't be at home with our attitude. We had to be out.
Right. You mentioned when you mentioned the religious part. One of the issues that was raised in running the place and reaching to the public. And this would be part of this person who's writing his master's thesis on this book, on the coffee house, was how was the place perceived by the public? And I would say the biggest challenge was this idea that it must be only for a certain type of person. There was one group saying it is a religious thing. Of course, if it's for young people, they're probably trying to get them to belong to their religion. Mm-hmm. That would be a very common thing. Another one would be it's for people with physical handicaps or people who are cognitively challenged. Immediately, people, there were times when people who work with disabilities, young people, or might even be older people who would come there, and they would have their coffee and things, or their drinks and pop, and or that it's just for young people. And I resisted that because you can just see how quickly places get typed. This is for young people. This is for Christians. And the other one, this is only for gay and lesbian people. This is, that. And so the idea that it's for everyone, and yet then when the Green Earth Cafe was in there, we would talk about there are people that come to the Green Earth, and there are other people that don't go in. Why is that? And when we'd talk with people, it would be something like, well, I didn't know if I was allowed in there. That if it's Denny's, for instance, or Perkins, or any number of places, you just open the door. You know the rules, but there are other places you don't automatically know the rules, and so this really was open, and it was not, from our point of view, just for young. It's not a youth center,
right?
And there were times I would consciously try to have a group for something for people who were 60, 70, 80, 90 years old. And that would be a different kind of a program. But that would mean that this 14-year-old that want to go doesn't necessarily want to be in with that same group. So people are so fragmented. And so one of the challenges would be to have a place where people, a variety of people, can mingle, which is almost impossible.
Right.
But and so there was this one thing about that it was it's only for gay and lesbian people. And it was one of the things I feel really good about, since I no longer work there, I received at least 3 letters from people who told me that the coffee house literally saved their lives.
Mm-hmm.
It was the only place, they said, in Bismarck they felt that was open to gay and lesbian people. There was a kind of openness about it, even having like a gay and lesbian history month or something like that.
Right, yeah, totally.
That it was the only place they felt that kind of openness.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated that. But you can see how quickly it's for young people, it's for handicapped people, it's for Christians, so that would be.
Yeah, at that time, we really needed something like that, too. I feel like 80s, 90s, I'm sure before that, too, but very cliquey for stereotypes, know? Like you said, there was a lot of places that, like, even I was told, like, oh, that's just for gay people, or that's just for rednecks, or,
Right.
Yeah, this place was really open to everybody, which is why I loved it so much, because I met friends who were so accepting. I had just moved to this town from another town where I was getting shit on for skateboarding or any, it was just rough on me in my youth. And then I get out of that place and I come to a new place, and it was open arms, and I loved it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing. And some of the people that like I saw as scary looking were just some of the most kind people I've ever met. And you were a part of that, so thank you.
Well, you're welcome. I guess thanks for saying it. That's great. When you think back at that 16-year-old Elijah now, how do you feel about that person? And what do you feel good about, and what do you feel kind of embarrassed about?
Yeah, that's another thing, too. Every once in a while, I'll get something that pops in my head that's really embarrassing, and it shouldn't be. Nobody else remembers it but me. I guess I just wish I could have been easier on myself, I was super hard on myself, and then came depression and not feeling accepted anywhere. And it was really that all the shit I took in junior high, that baggage stayed with me for years, throughout my 20s, even into my 30s. It wasn't really until the last 10 years of my life I've kind of gotten over that. It's weird how something like that will just stick with you. When you start to feel worthless at a young age, you don't really shake that off for a while,
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I carried for a long time. Mm-hmm. And if anything, it probably made me a better person in a sense, being accepted by these other weirdos in quotations.
Yes.
Made me more accepting of other people too.
So you were a skateboarder.
Yeah.
How good were you? Were you pretty good at that?
I was not great, but I got pretty good. And then I got into an accident where I fractured a couple ribs, punctured a spleen and a kidney, and then it was tough to get on the board for a while. I got back on for a little bit, but, it was my main transportation for a while. Before I got a car, I was just skateboarding everywhere. So that was kind of nice. That's my first vehicle.
What a story
honestly.
there, from skateboard to car.
Yeah, after I got in that accident, the first whiz I took, I went to the bathroom, took a pee, and it bubbled up like bubble bath. It was just weird. I thought, okay. I went back, laid down. I could barely breathe because, I just busted my ribs. And then I had to pee again later, and I went back to pee, and it was just dark. And I was like, Mom, come here. And then when she saw it in the toilet, she was like, okay, we're going to the hospital. They took me to the hospital, got checked out. The doctor had me pee into a little cup. And I came back with this just black pee in the cup. And he was like, oh, yep, you got internal bleeding. So a bunch more tests and whatnot after that. I went back home, and it took care of itself afterwards, just had to heal. Yeah, kind of took me out of skateboarding for a bit.
And so the healing was from, did you have to take some kind of medication, though? Maybe for pain or something?
Yeah, I probably took something for pain.
But it healed by itself somehow.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, just like ruptured spleen, kidney, I think it was.
Yeah.
Busted ribs. Yeah, that was one of the worst pains I ever had.
But that skateboarding world and the music, they were related as a certain kind of social
kind of went
atmosphere.
hand in hand. Yeah,
Yeah,
the whole punk realm for me, I guess, was skating and listening to this music and dressing this way, acting this way. Yeah.
So what were you listening to at that time, and how would you listen to it, and where did it come from? And this was a CD world already, I think.
Yeah. Tapes were still on shelves. CDs were taken over. We had, I think at the time, maybe even 3 CD stores in the mall. Then you had Discontent outside.
Oh.
Yeah, buying a lot of CDs. Sometimes you could trade in your old CDs for a couple bucks. Mostly, I don't know if you know, like No Effects, Rancid,
I
kind
know
of those
names.
popular punk rock groups. And then I got into the label Kill Rock Stars, which was out of Olympia, and a bunch of those other musicians too.
But then you had your own career as a music scheduler and
Yeah,
right.
my main thing, not just playing in various punk bands, but promoting and booking. So I booked shows all over town from pretty much 98 to 2019. So I haven't really done anything last 5 years
that's
for
been
sure.
quite recently, though.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and then the last few years, I've just got into podcasting. And this project I started last November. So almost a year. And I've done it every week except for last week. So when I started it, I had 10 stories edited, ready to go, and then 10 weeks worth of shows. And then during that period, I would just get other guests, whatnot. And then it got to a point where I was running behind. I'd go on vacation, but I would still have episodes air. And then over the last couple months, it's like, oh, I get this guest on Sunday, record it, edit it, and then put it out on Wednesday. And then last week, I had a couple guests back out, reschedule for later on this month. And then I booked another one for Monday, and then they didn't show up. I still haven't heard from them, so I don't know what happened to that person. So last week was the first Wednesday. I didn't even have an episode. I got a few emails and calls that day, like, what's going on? Are you done? What happened? I'm like, oh, no. Still going. But yeah, that was kind of my goal was to have one weekly for a whole year, and then lost it. But yeah, part of what I like doing too is just listening, to
Yes,
stories.
sure, yeah.
I like interviewing new people and hearing a bit of what their life was like and whatnot. So yeah, and somebody else came up with the idea, my first car,
Really?
for an interview. It's a good icebreaker, whatnot. I'm like,
Yes.
yeah, that is a good idea. Mostly everybody's had a first car, but
Right.
yeah.
And as I've tried it, I've just told people, I'm going to go on this podcast and called My First Car. And they're sucked in pretty fast thinking about, and I like the fact that you don't start with my birth, but you
Right.
start with that. You probably teenage 14, when you start driving, which would be 14, 15, 16, which means then I pull it back to who I was as a 2-year-old or 5-year-old. But it starts really with my youth,
Yeah.
as passing the driver's test, and in a community where it wasn't very hard to pass the driver's test, as opposed to even like when my kids took their driver's test in Bismarck, which meant that they had to parallel park, and but I was in a small town and didn't have those challenges. And not to make you feel bad, but well, I was thinking that you had some rough things about acceptance as a child, and I don't know if you remember that I was saying. Unless I'm totally delusional, I felt a lot of acceptance in my home community among my relatives and my uncles and aunts and cousins and grandparents and brothers and mothers and fathers, and then the school itself. Even though I know, and this is I'll call it the blessing of my life, is that ever since I was a child, and I mean child, that 5-6-year-old person, I was following my own individual passions in the world of music, studying history, what is now called humanities, that whole world of art histories. And Jeremiah's teaching a course in art history right at this moment in Prague through the University of New Haven in Connecticut. And classical music, totally open to that, the popular music of the middle 50s. And I've said to my music students at the University of Mary, when I was an adjunct there, I was part of the original rock and roll generation, 1955-56, when Rock Around the Clock becomes a very famous song in 1955. Elvis Presley's 1956, Hound Dog, and Heartbreak Hotel, which I still think is just a beautiful song. And so even though, when it comes to my life history, and when it comes to the arts, and let's say music, as a classical pianist, as a classical person, opera person, and I know that world and think about it a lot and experience it in different ways, I'm also part of the original rock and roll generation, 55, 56. And I can see that there are people like Chuck Berry and Fats Domino, Little Richard, the Everly Brothers, Buddy Holly, that I continue to find really magical and powerful. But part of the thing there is I'm sort of against nostalgia. And nostalgia is a feeling you get when you sense, if let's say you're listening to a pop song of your youth, maybe it's a grunge song which doesn't allow you to be nostalgic about it, but like, oh, that's what I loved when I was 14, and now I'm 45 or I'm 80, and time has passed. Those were the old days, and they're gone. That kind of poignancy over the passage of time is nostalgia, and I just resist that because I want to hear. So if I'm listening to the Everly Brothers or Little Richard or even Connie Francis died recently, and she was a popular female. It wasn't rock and roll, but it was a certain sound. That what was I hearing then? Rather than just feel that time has really passed. I was once a child. I was once a kid. But I'm not anymore. That's what nostalgia is. But I want to hear, though, that music at its, what is that music, and what was the grunge and and the thrash that you were listening to in 1993, 94. Would you say you have any nostalgia when you hear that music? Or is it like, what the hell is this?
I do. Yeah, I do. I think I'm a very nostalgic person.
Okay.
And I always have been, even when I was a kid. At 12, it's dumb, but I would think about like cartoons or movies that I saw like when I was 8.
Yes.
Even. And like, man, remember that time? And it was only like 4 or 5 years before that, Yes. But there's that time when there's a huge difference when you're 8, 12.
Yes. Yes.
And then 12 to 18. But now I'm 45. It doesn't seem like a huge difference when I was, am I 45, 44?
Okay.
When I was 39, not that big. Same numbers, but, not that huge of a leap. And I don't know. I get warm, fuzzy feelings when I think about certain moments of time beforehand. I guess that's nostalgia for me and sometimes a smell. I love that too, where I've gone into a business or a place or somebody's vehicle or something, and I smell something, and it takes me to another time, another place, very specific.
Yes.
And it's so weird how that works. It doesn't happen too often.
Yeah.
But when it does, it's like a time travel.
Yes. I've heard that smell is the one that of our senses that's the closest to memory.
Yeah.
That studies, somebody studied this, and that whiff of a certain kind of smell, things happen to you.
That's like the strongest nostalgia moments that I've had. Yeah. But that doesn't happen very often. It's weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for coming in and talking with me about this.
Even
if you're not a nostalgic person.
Well, I feel that, I know what does, I see it as a kind of ache over the passage of time.
Uh-huh.
Like, those days are gone. And I know, when we're playing golden oldies for people and all this kind of thing, and it bothers me, that would be that if, let's say, in the popular music world especially, people are, I think, locked in to the music of their childhood and youth.
Oh, right.
And so that how many people let's say in our community have learned a new song since they were 24 or 25, and how many are even interested in what is going on. Now, there is one part of the popular music world that I think is genuinely keeps up, and that's country music. That person who is 60 and loves country music is probably listening to some brand new stuff and is meeting some new singers, new artists, new stars, and thinks they're cool, as opposed to the person who is listening to what we might call the pop music of the time. For all those people who are Taylor Swift and Beyonce fans today, where would they be, let's say they're 18, where would they be when they're 68? That's 50 years. And what are they going to be listening to? And for me, as a classical music person, I said, the one thing that classical music does, there's a solid kind of foundation. You can always listen to Beethoven. It will never run out of style. You can listen to Mozart, Wagner, George Gershwin. You can go back to 1,000 years ago where Gregorian chant was the primary music of the church, and there's a certain sound. Mm-hmm. Classical music is always about the future, because you're trying to do. Let's say you're the Bismarck Mandan Symphony, and I used to give the intro lectures for their concerts, and let's say they're going to perform Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, which is kind of famous. Beethoven's Fifth Symphony might have had its first performance in 1810, something like that. But here's an orchestra saying, I'm going to try to do this. How well can I do this? Rather than that, well, that's from the past. Yes, it's 200 years old, but, or if you're playing the piano and you're playing Prelude by Chopin or Mozart Piano Sonata, there's always this sense I don't care if you're a 10-year-old working on it today or me, an 80-year-old person working on a Bach piece. When I can take those same pieces that I worked on Bach, let's say 60 years ago when I was 20 and I was taking piano in college, I'm still working on those pieces because it's always, can I do better? It's a strange kind of thing. So that's part of my resistance to nostalgia, and even though I'd say that the country music crowd, I think, tries to at least keep up with who is a new popular country music person that's going on right
a
now?
New
Yeah.
popular country.
And a few years ago, I would try to keep up, but
Right.
it's not that easy to keep up. Like I want to know what's the latest in hip hop and all this kind of thing. And I was doing that with the One World Coffee. I needed to be in touch with all these musics.
Yeah.
But that means I have to take some special time. And am I supposed?
I used to be like that with movies too, where I was watching almost anything and everything. If it was a new film, new movie, whatever, I was on top of it. I miss video rental stores, because you would just go and look at the cover,
Yes.
read the back a little bit, be like, I'm going to watch this, take it home. Now there's so much content, and we don't have, those movies that are straight to video or whatever. It's straight to streaming. And there's
Yes.
so much that I can't keep up with it.
Right.
And not just that, but a lot of, not to be a jerk, a lot of garbage, and I find myself looking at reviews
Yes. of course.
beforehand
Yeah.
and saying if it's really worth my time anymore. And now there's so much content that's come and gone that there was a period that it was really, I was struggling with because I was missing this, I'm missing that, I'm missing this and that. And you just can't keep up anymore.
Right.
I don't know. Music is like that too. And then styles. There's
Right.
sub-genres
Yes,
going
yes.
down and you're like, what? I don't even understand this anymore.
Right.
Yeah, there's certain new hip-hop acts and trap music with the beats that just...
Yes.
I
I remember my students at the United Tribes referring to ska, and I never was quite clear about ska is or was or whatever it is, but there is a place where I think the classical tradition creates a kind of stabilizing, solid strength, because it has a past, but it technically is always about the future. Kind of, this person, let's say you're a 14-year-old young person who is a violinist, and you're trying to play a Beethoven violin sonata. So, give it your best shot. You're stretching your skills. You're stretching. Can I do this? And then you play. Wow, I like that measure. I did a really good job with that. But the rest of it was just, I'm not satisfied. So it's a different world actually. So.
yeah.
But when it comes movies, because I'm part of Cinema 100, and every October and every January to March we have this film series where we show films at the Grand Theater, which is one of the nicest theaters in the country. It's a beautiful place. It's well run. It looks nice, and we show them on Thursdays at 3 and 6 o'clock, and we just finalized scheduling the October series, and so we're so aware of how, even since the time when we started in 1973, the world of where movies come from and how to get access to them. In 1973 when we started, a canister, whatever it's called, would come with the reel. It'd come to the airport, and one of the members would go pick it up, and then we would show it up at BSC or something with a projector. And then 80s came along with the video store, and that was you can now go down and you could browse, like you were saying.
Yeah.
Browsing, it's like a bookstore. What is this? And maybe I'd like this and all this. And then the DVD came along, and then what else? And then also now it's streaming. So the world of film watching and access has really changed. And but film continues to happen. I have to. I memorized the 10 movies that were nominated for Best Picture. Do you mind if I tell you?
Please,
remind
please
you
do.
what, and then I'm going to ask how many of these have you seen?
Right.
Okay, and they were easy to do because they were alphabetical. I hope I do a good job. A is for Honora, The Brutalist, A Complete Unknown, that's the Bob Dylan movie, Conclave, the church popes electing a pope. D is for Dune 2, and then Amelia Perez. Then it was The Nickel Boys, I'm Still Here, The Substance with Demi Moore, and Wicked. Have you seen any of those?
Yes.
Which ones have you seen?
Dune 2.
Okay.
I love those movies.
Okay.
I read the book right before those came out.
Yes.
And The Substance, I was watching at some other place, and I didn't get to finish it. And that one drives me nuts because I can't, like I said, I miss video rental places.
Yes.
And I know I could rent it digitally, but I'm a stickler for spending that much money on something that I can't record myself like I used to do with VHS movies, or rent it and watch it more than once, for
Yes.
a few days, where
Yes.
digitally you rent it now, you watch it once, and then it's over, I think. What was and then Wicked we saw. Bunch of those other
You
ones.
saw Wicked. You
Yeah.
said- yeah.
Yep. A bunch of the other ones have been on my list for a while. Conclave. The Bob Dylan one is now on HBO, so I can watch that.
Okay.
And then,
Did you ever see the one that won Best Picture, Honora?
no, I did not.
Okay.
But they've been on my list. And that's the thing. I'm kind of at the mercy of streaming services now, like
Sure.
what they're going to put out and allow me to watch. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's frustrating. Although I like getting movies from the library now.
Yeah.
I check that.
On DVD.
Yeah. I'll go there and I'll check out films. Although I should be looking for some of these other movies at the library now that you brought it up.
You should. Yes, we should do also.
Yeah.
Right. I need to keep up. Well, it's not that easy to, whatever keeping up means anymore.
Right, yeah,
It's just crazy.
Yeah,
Honora was one of my favorites, that's for sure. But A is for Honora. I love that movie, and I was rooting for it, and then surprisingly it won. So see that someday,
Yeah. And then, talking about movies too and our youth, there's something about that time in your youth. For me, it's kind of 80s and 90s for movies.
Yes.
I think I'm always going to revert to watching those as comfort food.
Yes.
And especially when I'm older, I've told my son, if I'm ever in a coma, put this music on, or these shows or movies. For a show, it's going to be Seinfeld. That's just something I can replay
Yes,
and
yes.
listen to and watch whenever. It's comfort food. It's my mac and cheese. Do you feel that way with yourself? Like, are you always going to revert to 50s, 60s movies?
Well, I'm anti-nostalgia, but
Right.
it's hard to resist. Nostalgia creeps in because you sense the passage of time. And I was a child and a youth once, and now I'm not anymore. And so there you're thinking, I want this comfort, and maybe if it's the Breakfast Club, I'm going to watch that, and I'm going to care about those four people, or what.
Yeah.
What year would that be? 1982, maybe, or
Breakfast Club?
Yeah.
Probably 85, 86.
It's 80s, so definitely
Yeah.
right. That so
Yeah, that's comfort
there's-
food for me too.
yeah. But remember, there was a time, even though you've never experienced this, where we would. I think about this every once in a while, and someone should write a book about it. And that is that until just maybe the 80s, you didn't expect to see a movie ever more than once.
Oh yeah,
We'd go to the movie theater, and I saw lots of movies, tons of movies, and with my family or friends, and then in the 60s and early 70s and 70s. But we would see it, but we were not, unless it would appear as the late night movie on television, even that was not that you didn't get that many of those movies. You really saw a movie once, and then when you were able to buy your own movie, that was a drastic aesthetic change, I think, in the sense of, because now you could own it, and you could put it in anytime you want. You might watch it twice, or our children, where who the joke is that they literally watch Lion King 500 times, and 500 is not an exaggeration.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally, or they put it in the machine at least 500 times, and they watched 20 minutes of it, and so that really changes the way we experience the movie magic, the movie power, and with all of its. But
yeah. It's kind of weird you can't even imagine what the next step will be, because with music too, it went from records to beta, cassette tape, CD, and then digital. Like no records are coming back now, which is pretty dope.
I have a great vinyl collection that Sarah Jeremiah says, don't sell them. And I said, well, maybe I should just take them out to the farm where my wife grew up, or Bonnie's, and melt them all. No, don't do that. Don't do that. Why not? Turn it into some kind of a sculpted thing. And, no, don't do that. But why? You can, yes, they are, people will buy them.
And then with movies too, how it's all the digital streaming, and sometimes it's not even going into the theater. It's just going to be at your home. And
right.
Like after that, like even with music, I can't even begin to imagine what the next step is.
Right.
After that, you just
both
in the moment.
How it's produced, but also what should it sound like? Only 130 years ago, nobody heard any music that wasn't produced live.
Yeah.
I mean, throughout most human history, if there's music to be played, it was going to be live. Human beings are there with their violin or their drum or their flute or whatever it is. And then the 20th century is really unusual in the sense that we can now hear music when they're automated and there's no person around.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of strange, actually. Maybe that's not even a good thing. Maybe but at least at the One World Coffee House, it was live.
It was live.
And
it was
band
loud.
Was there doing the Bible song, and and you had a message, and it might be a more relevant message now than ever. When it comes to religion in our lives. So that's.
I played that song at when we were practicing it at a friend's house. His dad came downstairs with a Bible. And he said, try and shove this up my ass.
Oh, my gosh. See, there's a whole story of it there going on.
I know. Oh, man. I'm going to have him on the podcast sometime, too.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to have to ask him about that, if he remembers.
Yes. Wow.
All right. We should wrap up. It's going to be a lot of editing for me to do, but I'm only going to touch it a little bit because I love every minute of this. Thank you for coming in, sharing some of your story. And you've lived a long life, so I know there's going to be a lot more stories. The chair will be open for you if you want to come back again. And
yes. Well, it'd be fun just to visit with you.
Yeah.
We could actually do what is called have lunch at some place. Do two people ever do that? Or say, hey, let's go and have a pastry someplace.
Let's do it.
Let me give you a copy of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Oh, hell yeah.
Which is, passed in 1948 after World War II and after the Holocaust and all sorts of horrible things. And then the governments of the world and the United Nations came up with these 30 things that they considered the basic human rights for all human beings. And it's a very pretty little book.
Hey, thank you, man.
So I'll give you that.
I like when my guests give me stuff.
Okay. Yes. That's my story, man.